Welcome back to Listening Well Podcast, episode 2. I'm Britni.
My name's Jenna.
And today we're going to be getting into the brain and how it relates to all of this mental health and special needs and how it relates to occupational therapy. So, Jenna, I know the brain is extremely complex, and you could spend all 10 episodes
just talking about the brain.
Just on the brain.
Yes.
But we don't have that kind of time.
No.
So can you give us like a snapshot of the function of the brain, what's going on, how it works, all of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, your brain, obviously, like, it is literally controlling everything that you do. So it makes you who you are. It has role within your emotions, your behaviors, your personality, but then also just how you are able to move your body and control your body and integrate or understand the different elements that are coming in from you, from your environment. So things like your sensory system, being able to understand when something is cold or hot or sharp or soft. I mean, you, like Britni said, you can go on and on and on just about how beautifully unique and fascinating the brain truly is. And there's so many multiple parts that create the brain. There's all of these lobes, systems, cortexes, all of these different elements, but each one may have a large function specifically, but all of them work together in order to actually make you. And so one fascinating aspect that I like to look at is just how the brain develops from when you are in utero.
Yeah.
So when you're in the your mom's belly, or to when you are an older adult. And so when you start out in utero, it's just fascinating how the brain will start out as this, it's called a neural tube. And then it'll grow into a brain. But when you are born, your brain is only a quarter of the size of what it'll be as an adult. And from the time that you're 0 to 5 is when your brain is creating all of these neural pathways and connections that allow for all of these different aspects to communicate together and to be effective. And you make those neural pathways by your environment, by your genetics, and just the different ways that you interact with people and stuff. And so that's why it's so important. Those first 5 years of a child's life are so important for their brain anatomy, not just when they are that age, but 20 years down the line. Because when you are building this foundation of all these neural pathways coming together in one spot, that's what you have, and that's what you're going to have when you are 30 years old. Obviously, your brain continuously tries to create new neural pathways or get rid of ones that aren't necessarily important, but your foundation is created when you are 0 to 5 years old. And so,
It's fascinating because, I mean, you're doing your capstone here at the church. So there is large permission to bring faith into the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just love that. But I love talking about that God is such an amazing creator, that he would not just create human beings in his image, but that he would give us such complex organs and systems in our body to be able to function well. And and work for us. And we were created for community. We see that all throughout Scripture. That's a huge element in Christianity and in our faith is community, togetherness, fellowship, all of those things, connections, connectivity. And so it's interesting when you bring up, the first 5 years of a child's development. That's when, you can get into attachment theories and all kinds of things.
Like what is it? The serve and return. Yeah. And like nurture, nature, and all of those different things that like cause and effect of like when you are interacting with a child, you give them something. I always think of it kind of like a tennis match where it's like you serve something and then the child receives it and then gives you something back. And that's how they're creating those pathways and understanding of the world around them.
Yes. So somebody say who, and we understand too, this is a generalization. We know that many other factors go into play, but for the connectivity part, that togetherness piece, how God designed the family to work, the functional, healthy family, where there is secure attachment, where there is love, where there is nurturing, that's developing their brain. That sends signals and cues of safety. It's the foundation, as you said, and so that's how the child then perceives the world around them. Is they begin to see a world of love and safety, or unfortunately the other side of that being true of the child is not being nurtured or in a loving environment or stable or physical touch, those types of things, and it has an adverse kind of development of cues of safety. The world is not a safe place to be, and it's not a loving place, it's a dangerous place, and all of those things develop and impact the brain and the body. And I just love doing a lot of counseling with people. You get into a lot of conversations of things like trauma or grief or anxiety being a big one, and just how good God is, that we know that when He created, it was perfect. Like our brains, our bodies, they worked perfectly in the garden when He first created. They were at their most peak level of functionality, right? And then the fall happens, sin happens, right? And it didn't just impact our souls spiritually, but it impacted our bodies as well. And so you find things like disease and death and those types of things that impact the brain and the body. And so we get into a lot of conversation about how the brain and there's a big nerve, the vagus nerve, and just how they are constantly relaying information back and forth, and these are all things that we geek out about, that are just so cool that we'll get into at another time. But Romans 12, Paul talks about don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I love when science catches up to what God says. And so you have this thing, it's a big word, neuroplasticity, where God literally designed our brains to, yes, we have these neurons that fire in the same direction based on various things. But it can be, in some cases, the ability to be able to rewire itself into healthy ways of functioning. And so what an amazing just quality of God to be able to give us an organ that it was designed to work for us, and then the fall happened. Now it works against us. It can work against us, but He provides a new way. He provides a way to be able to rewire and learn cues of safety and learn how to deal with things like anxiety and various traumas and different things. And so we're going to get into, at another time, a podcast specifically on ways to cope, I think. And
it's just that like muscle memory. It's that same concept. Like when you are trying to learn a sport or when you're trying to learn a new skill, you have to continuously practice at it and continuously try to learn that muscle memory. And it's the same exact thing with your brain. I mean, you have these things like you have those negative thoughts that things that are just constantly coming into your mind. You have your growth mindset or your fixed mindset.
Yep.
So many different things that we'll get into later.
Yes.
But
yes. An example. So Nora, and she gets it honestly, I will say Nora and I have a bad habit of telling ourselves we can't do something.
Yes. Yep.
I can't do this. It's too hard. I can't do this. It seems too overwhelming. I can't do this. It's impossible. Just this morning, she was saying, she has to take a medicine because she was sick. It tastes really bad. And she was almost in tears at the table saying, I can't do it. It's too hard. And so retraining her brain to be able to say, no, you can. You've proven that this is your 4th day of taking it. You can do it. And we know that you're going to be okay after you take it. Yeah. And so just... yeah, it's muscle memory. You tell yourself you can't do something, your brain remembers that. I can't do it. I can't do it. And you have to be intentional of renewing your mind to say, I can. Oh, I can. And so for me, it was like I do that. I put this into practice intentionally with things like running a 5K. I had just that habit of I could never run a 5K. It's too hard. It's like, I'm not a runner. You go through all the things and all of that's true. I'm not a runner. I'm not great at sports and the things, and thought I would collapse before I ever crossed the finish line. But as an exercise to prove to myself that I could, to help create new muscle memory, I started training, making that decision to say, I'm going to do this every day. I'm going to do this. And I ran that 5K, and the goal was just to finish. Yeah. And I finished. Yeah. And so just doing intentional practices, whether it's, that positive self-talk or training for a 5K, doing something that you never thought you could do before, to intentionally rewire to create new pathways and new neurons. And so this is such an exciting conversation that, again, as we kind of unfold the series, when we get into things like coping mechanisms for mental health related issues like anxiety being a big one, this conversation will naturally come back up. Oh yeah. The brain, it doesn't end here. No. But we wanted to just give you kind of a brief synopsis, a brief picture of what the brain looks like, does, functions, and ultimately why God gave us all brains. So, Do you have anything else you want to add?
I think also there's a huge aspect too with the brain of the fact that in order for your body to communicate effectively, you have your neurons, and then they utilize these things called neurotransmitters, and then you have hormones. And so these are all kind of interconnected to be able to effectively communicate different needs or wants within your body. And again, it is so complex, and the same thing where it's like God made us so perfectly, because one little imbalance within these neurotransmitters or these hormones can really affect how you feel, how you think, and just how your body overall reacts to anything. And so that's something else that we'll get into, of just the effects of how these hormones and these neurotransmitters can truly just affect your ability to be you and be who God necessarily designed us to be, but because of the fall, we aren't able to do that necessarily.
Right. I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's a conversation that we'll get into again at a different time. But just to touch on the stigmas, when you say that there's a mental health related issue happening, there can be a stigma of it's a faith issue. It's a supernatural. You must be demon possessed, or whatever. And to understand it's a bit more than that. It can be, and so we'll kind of get into some of those myths and present,
debunk them.
Debunk them, and ultimately, whether it's faith or science or both, we know the Lord is over both of those, the creator of both of those, and just bringing that into these conversations will be important moving forward. So.
And I think just our overall hope is to tie religion and science and just understand that like they can be interconnected. They can be worked together. It doesn't have to be one or the opposite. It doesn't have to be this huge spectrum. It can be just the two together, working together, so that way every individual are able to be and function. Yeah, absolutely. I was reading a book, Pastoral Counseling by Bruce Peterson, and in it he talks about the different types of pastoral care and counseling. And one of those, I didn't recognize the term, but pastoral psychotherapy is a field. And so that's something that got my antenna going, and I just thought that's the beautiful thing in reality of pastoral counseling integrates psychotherapy tools and elements. And so it doesn't have to be either or, it can be an and, as well, and a partnership. So that's exciting. Thank you, Jenna. Yes,
again.
Thank you.
And so we'll record here some more podcasts for you soon, but there's the brain and a little bit about it. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.